Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. Please be sure to listen to the other aBlogtoWatch podcast, which is aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest is Peter Cho, co-founder of Jack Mason. Peter, welcome back.
Hey Ariel, thanks for having me again. Great to be here.
Dr. Pepper is on everyone's mind, Peter. Jack Mason just released, we're just sort of getting into it here, a limited edition with American soft drink franchise, I guess you call it. I don't even know who owns Dr. Pepper these days. Dr. Pepper, which growing up was, I don't know why, the preferred drink of choice for Dungeons and Dragons players and revelers. I don't know if this was common elsewise, but for some reason, they were very zealously into this. So do you have a lot of Dungeons and Dragons enthusiasts now wearing a Jack Mason watch?
You know, that is the first time I've actually heard that. Being here from Texas, we usually hear more of the nostalgic kind of tie to Dr. Pepper, but the Dungeons and Dragons aspect.
This is a Los Angeles thing, yes. I don't understand it, but they were very sad. Mountain Dew? No way.
Yeah, the Dr. Pepper collaboration. Yeah, this is year 2 of doing it. Being from Texas, a Texas brand, it seemed only natural to collaborate with the Dr. Pepper organization. And to answer your question, they are their own company, but they've merged with Keurig, so it's like a Keurig Dr. Pepper organization, and under their portfolio.
Is Keurig a behemoth now, the coffee cup thing?
Mm-hmm. It's Keurig Dr. Pepper is kind of the big group, and under them they have a large portfolio of other products as well.
Do we call them Big Caffeine?
Big Caffeine? Yeah, I guess you can call them that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what these products have in common, other than the fact that they're beverages.
Yeah, I think once you grow a certain size, you just start gobbling up other brands as well. But certainly, having the privilege to work with the team there directly, because they are headquartered here in Dallas as well as we are. There's definitely as large as they are, they have more of this, more small business mentality where everyone's extremely collaborative and just easy to work with. So it's been great so far.
Companies like Dr. Pepper, the sort of historic, we'll call them consumer brands, are notoriously protective of their image, their intellectual property. I guess you'll have to go to the aBlogtoWatch website to see the exact Jack Mason Dr. Pepper collaboration. But talk a little bit about getting the design rights and making the Dr. Pepper folks happy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I can back up to the actual original, sort of the genesis of the collaboration. I reached out to them because they're a company in our backyard, and us being a Texas brand, we felt that it was a kind of a cool thing to collaborate with other historic Texas brands as well, to just sort of reinforce our foundings and our roots. And so when I reached out to them, it was actually kind of funny, because to them, they were thinking, why is a watch company reaching out to us, a beverage company? And so I prepared a PowerPoint type presentation that told them all about the history of, Rolex, Pepsi, the original founding of the GMT, and kind of, went through that whole presentation. And by the end of it, they were super convinced and wanted to be a part of this sort of subculture that we call watch enthusiasts. And that's how it actually started.
Cola has it. Root beer has it. Yeah. Lemon lime stuff has it. Don't you want to have it too? Was that how the conversation went?
I mean, pretty much. But the funny thing is, I actually made a point to say, those weren't actual official collaborations. These were nicknames that were provided by, or that was given to them by the customers. And so why not make this an official thing? And they were all about it.
Now, once you release a watch like this, you can't really judge beforehand who's going to be into it. But I know that when everyone I've talked to has had sort of these more niche collaborations, once they release the watch, they get feedback from the woodwork, so to say, of people that, you have no idea had the relationship with the product. What have been some of the things you've heard? It hasn't been that long, but I'm sure there's been some people with deep connections, nostalgia with Dr. Pepper who have, commented. Tell me about some of that.
Oh yeah. As soon as it came out, to be honest with you, I was actually more focused on the watch enthusiast. I was more focused on they would immediately get it because they knew the Pepsis of the world, the root beers of the world, and its relationship to watches. But what I found really surprising was the actual Dr. Pepper community, and their audience and how much they resonated with it. And even within the watch community, the very first things that I heard was, "Oh my gosh, my grandfather drank a Dr. Pepper every day of his life," and it was just something that we did. I did growing up. This is what the customer is saying, and so there is actually a lot more nostalgic sort of tie-ins. And again, being from Texas, our Texas customer base, I mean, there was no explanation needed. They were immediately drawn to the beverage. Because it just has that more family kind of significance to it. So,
and what is their reaction to a watch? So there's this community, and this is, I don't know in marketing what the term is, the hardcore, the enthusiast, the lifer, but there's this community of people who have a positive association with Dr. Pepper, which is a beverage, which means that they like this intellectual property. They want to be reminded of it. What is their reaction to, and again, not the most high-end watch in the world. That's obviously a part of the point of Jack Mason be affordable. But what is their reaction to a luxury timepiece, which now features this very non-luxury, right? That's the whole point of a soft drink. It's affordable to everyone. I'm just curious because if you're a watch person, you get it. If you're not, I wonder what kind of questions it raises, in your mind as a consumer.
Sure. I think the reason why we've seen the success that we've had was because during the design process of the actual watch, we made it a point to not plaster the Dr. Pepper logo all over the watch. I mean, immediately, when you do see products that are done in that sort of manner, the product looks a little more novelty, looks a little more of a promotional type item. So instead, what we did was we implemented sort of the brand values of Dr. Pepper. We implemented the most important things to them. And so the biggest call out is during the early 1900s, their campaign slogan was "Drink a bite to eat" at 10, 2, and 4 o'clock. So 10, 2, and 4 were a direct tie-in.
Oh, that explains the loom color thing.
Yes, exactly. And so it was like teed up for us to implement that kind of that slogan into our watch. And so, again, doing it very subtly, and the execution was more of an Easter egg as opposed to in your face. And so that's why we decided to have the loom color glow a different color than the rest of the indices.
I was curious about that. I was looking at pictures because for those that don't know what we're talking about, the color of the luminous material for the hour markers is slightly different for those points, like 4 o'clock at 10. So you wouldn't really know what they are unless you put those things together. That's fun. What about the yellow? The the hand on the dial, the GMT hand's yellow. Yep. Where does that color come from?
Yeah, so the Dr. Pepper branding and merchandise packaging back in the 1930s came in that color palette. So the logo that we actually use on the rotor is a logo that you don't see today on today's branding. That was the logo from, again, back in the 1930s. And when you look at it, it definitely has that sort of old school font design to it. And so we thought that was just more of an interesting color palette and just, again, more about the story and paying homage to the history behind the brand. And so that's why we decided to go with that, that sort of artwork.
I want to generally comment to those listeners who are not in the United States to try to explain a little bit about this, because again, I think on the surface level, this and other similar types of relationships with a watch brand and just say it, something that somebody grew up with can be sort of confusing because there's sort of a mismatch. Like, that's not luxury. I think what is important is in America, there are fervent collector groups for these types of consumer products that have been around for generations and have a bunch of collateral associated with it. Signage, packaging, sometimes other merchandise. If you don't know about people that collect Coca-Cola things, for example, you'd be surprised. I've been in people's homes that are Coca-Cola collectors, and it's all kinds of stuff. There's from shower curtains to toilet paper, right? It's all kinds of stuff. And I think the reason people hyper-focus on collecting it is not because they're in love with a sugary soft drink. It's more about the fact that they associate that with some type of pleasant time in their life, usually their childhood, being around family. And obviously in the United States and probably other parts of the world, there is a huge sense of remembering the past fondly because we live in crazy times and people think about, what they believe as being more stable times. So that's really the foundation of why things like this make sense. And I'm sure you'll say a little bit more, Peter, but is this a United States phenomenon? I'm sure it has little bits and pieces elsewhere. I imagine Japan has a similar version of it, but I haven't seen a lot of this around the world because I don't know that people necessarily grow up everywhere with such strong consumer products that have advertised and marketed and had such a visual impact as they have in America with some of the large campaigns and things like that. I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, with Dr. Pepper specifically, it is a Texas-born company, and so there was little to no explanation needed when it came to this collaboration. When it comes to international appeal, when it comes to these kinds of things, I haven't lived internationally, but I have spoken to many folks who do have or currently do. And it's interesting because I think that with international residents, the idea more than the product itself, I think it's more so the American culture that appeals to them. And so, for example, like Japan, I'm not so sure if it would be Coca-Cola specifically, or
I meant their own local domestic products.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There is certainly things like that. I've traveled to Japan. I've traveled to my home country in South Korea, and as well as parts of Europe. And I certainly do see I do have extended family, actually, as to use an example, in South Korea, and there are certain products that they grow up with. And certain brands that they grew up with, like a certain drink or a certain type of cartoon they grew up watching, that we wouldn't get over here. And so it's interesting because some of those, what I find interesting is some of that pop culture that exists in other countries, I think have slowly also leaked almost in reverse into the U.S. in many ways as well.
Oh yeah. And if you travel, I remember traveling to London and remember seeing these stores, and I've seen them in other parts of the world as well. They horrify me actually, but they specialize in American junk food, and apparently they're very popular. And if you've seen these places, you know what I'm talking about. They literally, I don't have to say, they specialize in American junk food, like stuff that you wouldn't want. You would tell people don't eat too much of that. And so I've seen this exporting of this American junk food culture in other places, which truly surprised me because they're trying to appeal to not kids who didn't grow up with this, but saying like, oh, Americans that had a good childhood grew up with this junk. So you should have some as well, which was, again, an amusing thing, but I think supports the idea that this is a cultural phenomenon and that it's not per se about a sugary soft drink, but more about this sort of collective interest in American food-based nostalgia. And, we grew up in a time where one of the biggest marketers around us, in addition to insurance and pharmaceutical companies, were food companies. Major national food companies whose products could be sold basically everywhere in America had constant messaging, and we grew up around it, and we saw the logos, we saw the color palettes. The Coca-Cola bottle, like that design is burned into people's heads. When you see the Dr. Pepper logo, it's unmistakable. So the ability for a watch to take you somewhere else has been always a celebrated element. And this is just an exercise in that, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. No, absolutely. It really is. And I've actually, with our collaboration specifically, we've had several quite a few international customers who reside in parts of Europe and even in Asia, who picked up the watch by reaching out and saying, "Oh, is this an official collaboration? I love Dr. Pepper," that kind of thing. And so it is interesting and really pretty remarkable to really feel firsthand the power of like the brand power that a soda can have. And so it's been really cool to be a part of that.
Let's move on to another new product, something else which has come out since our last Superlative conversation, and that's the Canton, which is a dressier watch collection. I actually haven't seen one of these myself yet, but I think what's interesting about this is that, and I don't even know the etymology of the word Canton, but I've only ever heard it as reference to the regions of Switzerland. It might mean something else. I don't know. But I was just curious. I'm actually surprised no one's ever used it as a term for a watch before. Maybe they have in Switzerland, but it's sort of like a watch in America being called State or something like that. How'd you come up with this name, and then how has this been received? And is this a term which is just used in Switzerland? Yeah,
it's interesting. So actually, I guess it depends on what the reference is, because we actually call it Canton. And so the naming was actually quite simple. So our previous headquarter location was at the intersection. It was at the intersection of Canton and another street called Hall. And so
it was a street name.
It was a street name, but also there's an actual small town east of us, about an hour and a half east of where we are, also called Canton, and they actually happen to have the world's largest antique fair. It's like multiple square miles of. Okay, so it is one of those things where, yes, it might be an old European term, but it was adopted for city use in America, as is so many other things. Yeah. And so we thought it was an appropriate sort of name, and I actually like the sound of it. Just personally, it sounds nice and easy to remember. But this was a new collection for us that we released just a couple of months ago. But it was an ambitious project for us. It was actually our first Swiss-made watch. All of our other watches are here built in the U.S., whereas this one we layered on, went through the exercise of layering on an entirely new supply chain, and had this fully assembled and everything that a Swiss-made watch is required to be, and it was really driven by the movement. I was extremely fond of the Leger Perret movement. It's kind of becoming a little more, more widely used out there in the industry. Second to Sellita. And so the G100 base caliber, what do you, I mean, there's a lot to say about this move, but just out of curiosity, what particularly draws you to it? To be honest with you, it starts from the top, so to speak. It's public knowledge that the company was bought out by the Citizen Group, and obviously Citizen owns Miyota as well, who make fantastic, robust movements. And I felt that just as a organization, that made a lot of sense. I like to tell people it's kind of the best of two worlds, right? You got the sort of structure, the operational sort of complexity of a Japanese organization, and then you combine that with the craftsmanship and just sort of the romance that a Swiss movement manufacturer has. And you then multiply that into, or add that into it becoming a really just a really nice, robust, luxury movement company. And so, that really drew me to it. Obviously the G100, when you look at the architecture of it, it is more or less based off the 9000, the ever so popular 9000 series Miyota, which is a fantastic movement. But obviously you get the additional power reserve of 68 versus the more traditional 42. And then the beautiful movement finishing. I think that that in itself is just something that immediately ties it to Swiss craftsmanship. So that's what I was extremely attracted to.
Now, a lot of people don't necessarily understand that at a watch brand, because, like you said, supply chain differences, the same watch can be produced in different facilities, sometimes using parts made by completely different factories and things like that. It can happen. And brands like Jack Mason and others are actually smart to keep testing new suppliers and things like that to see where improvements can be made, because otherwise you end up having basically the same watches forever, and it's hard to move out of that. My question is, did you see much of a difference? Such laurels are rested upon Swiss made, and there's such a sense of prestige that Swiss made is a lot better than a lot of other ones. You've seen people try to do more manufacturing and assembly outside of it. You saw it more in France, a little bit in England. America has its share, of course, in Japan. The question is, as a brand owner who's trying to get the best possible quality for a good price, what was the end result like? Was it so much more amazing? Did it have just a slight edge? Was it the same? Maybe not as good? I'm just curious from the business person's perspective, what that was like.
Yeah. That's a great question, because depending on the listener's sort of journey in the watch world, if you are just starting out, there's an appeal to made in Switzerland, and to be honest, there always will be. There's no denying their rich history, the amazing brands that have come out of that. But we live in a different world today, and it is truly a global. When it comes to supply chain, it's a global effort. And what I discovered, and actually, I'll even explain why we decided to do this. It was a test. It was a test to see kind of our own audience and any new customer of ours. How do they respond to the fact that this watch is Swiss made versus the ones that we do currently, which are, we make our parts in Asia, bring them in to final assembly and movement regulation here in the States. And to be fully transparent, the response has been actually just neither here nor there. I mean, I'm extremely engaged with our own audience, even within our own Facebook group. I'm on there personally asking questions like, what do you guys think of this? And ultimately, it really just comes down to less about where it's made, just because those who are more seasoned know that the Swiss made marking has less and less appeal. It's more so, just as long as the quality, the physical objective quality of the watch is good. It's less important where it's made. But, for us from a business perspective, it was important to test to see if, as we try to grow our audience, grow our customer base, what's going to resonate more? Is it going to be the Swiss made collection, or is it going to be, the US assembly collection? And so it's a little too early to be honest, because we just launched the watch a couple of months ago to kind of tell. But it's certainly something that we're kind of putting, just tracking, and with other sort of economic, environments that are about to change with the new administration and things like that, and other things like more on the logistics side of things, importing, exporting. There are additional costs that need to be considered. And so, launching this watch as a Swiss-made watch was also more or less, it was almost a contingency plan in case unforeseen things happen when it comes to importing parts.
Very interesting. And something I've been talking about in multiple podcasts now, and I like to hear people's thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. And this interesting contrast, and I guess the point is how much politics affects our industry. And the way I usually open it is when we go to these watch shows like Basel Worlds of Past and Watches and Wonders. There's a distinct element where you're in your own little world, that whatever's going on, the rest of the world doesn't matter. You don't want to know about current events. And in general, in the luxury industry, politics are never discussed. With that said, the political atmosphere has such a huge effect on the market, demand, confidence. As you said, these days, like, will something cost more money? And it's just interesting how much the luxury industry does not want to talk about politics for pretty obvious reasons, yet is so inherently intertwined into politics, such that the small changes affect whether or not somebody buys something from you, whether or not the mood. It's kind of a funny contrast between what is wanted to talk about, yet the fact that it has such a huge impact, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because, yes, the luxury brands they're almost unaffected when it comes to this, specifically where, on the topic of tariffs. I'm sure tariffs are going to be a hot topic here in the next year. Yeah.
Let's hope not.
But, something like that is, even amongst my own, peers and other brand owners in the industry, been brought up this entire year. I've been bringing it up. Our buddies at other watch companies and watch brands, they know I'm always bringing it up. What do you guys think about these potential tariffs, or these, what's the plan? What's the contingency plan? And really, we really don't know until we get there. But what's interesting from that is we started discussing, well, what can we do together? How can we work together? As a group to help each other out. And so we don't really have any answers to that right now, but the discussions are being had. And I think that that's something extremely powerful. And I think that's something really great, to be honest with you, for bringing a few of these brands together who really are in the business for the right reasons and looking to, build a solid foundation for longevity when it comes to American brands and, honestly, American watchmaking.
Hey y'all, Peter Cho here from Jack Mason Watches. If you don't know us by now, we are an independent watch company based out of Dallas, Texas, with a focus on building luxury-grade watches here in the United States. I started this brand with other partners back in 2015 to fulfill a desire and passion of establishing our own legacy right here in Texas. With over 20 years of traditional watch design experience in the United States and Switzerland, we guarantee that each Jack Mason watch is 100% designed in-house, and each component of the watch is unique to us. We don't use any off-the-shelf parts, which has been a strict practice since day one. Heading into a decade of business in 2025, we have plans in place to raise the bar and continue to push the boundaries in establishing heritage in Texas and making our mark in American watchmaking for many more decades to come. For more information about the brand, you can visit us at www.jackmasonbrand.com, or you can follow us on social media at Jack Mason Brand, and also find us on YouTube.
I want to talk a little bit more about this because I think it's very important to discuss the ramifications. In the United States, the last several decades has had pretty low costs to move things in and out of the country. So most Americans haven't had to think about this because it hasn't been that big of a deal. Compare that to other places. We'll look at two markets, Brazil and India, for example, where the cost to bring watches in is so high that retailers have to think about all these hoops to jump through just to make sure their watches are competitively priced, because what ends up happening is consumers will go to another country and buy those things. Now that's just one small manifestation about how taxes and tariffs can have an effect on the market. But small changes like that can affect consumer behavior in a huge way. You're talking about another angle to it, which is if something assembled in America costs significantly less to sell than something which is imported, that can also have a huge effect. There can be an appreciable difference if something is made in America versus made in Switzerland, for example. Obviously, watches are a highly unusual niche category of good. But now we're having to think like people in other countries who for the longest time have had to worry about this stuff. Commodity changes, the price of gold, for example, but relatively small things, at least they seem small, can shift the industry in huge ways. And what you're talking about is going to some of your colleagues and saying, hey, everybody, what are we going to do if our cost of business goes up? We either have to deal with it alone and maybe we have some camaraderie and we can help each other, or as a group, we try to insulate ourselves somehow. I'm not sure what that means, but we try to make sure that our cost of doing business doesn't fluctuate in such a crazy way as it might be given the outlook. How would you add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is a very serious topic, and I think most of the industry we're either kind of ignoring it or just deal with it when we get there. But I think it's important to have these discussions right now, even though we don't have answers, to at least talk about what is going to happen when our cost of doing business, cost of goods go up. When you look at the micro brand and smaller independents industry, the margins are already slim. And, there isn't a whole lot of room left over. And with the increasing demand for customers wanting better quality, more value at very aggressive price points, all of a sudden it becomes extremely difficult for brands to stay competitive. And more importantly, actually build a real business that actually has the opportunity to grow. And so I think right now there are options. One thing that I know probably every customer is not going to want to hear is, I wouldn't be surprised if you see price increases across the board in different industries, and not just watches. It's just, one way to deal with it. I mean, that's kind of the quick and easy way. But there's a huge risk to that. I mean, every brand owner, even today, it's a sensitive thing when it comes to prices, and in fear of losing your customers. But I think it's one of those things that has to be talked about more, which is why I'm happy to have the opportunity to discuss it here more on a public platform. I do think that brands need to be more transparent about, hey, look, we make this amazing product that you absolutely love. And certain brands have the privilege of customers buying multiples and multiples of their own of that one brand's watches. But I do think that there needs to be more education and more discussions out there that, hey, some of these brands, quite honestly, don't charge enough money. And I think if you want to be able to, see a brand that actually has the longevity to exist the next 3, 5, 10, however many years they plan on doing so, that cost eventually has to be passed along to the customer. And so it's a sensitive topic. And I don't think that anyone has the right answer right now, but when it comes to making things in the U.S. specifically, it's certainly a discussion that needs to be had continuously, because when we did the Canton watch, the Swiss-made Canton watch, and we broke down the costs, it's actually really interesting. What it costs to make something in Switzerland, which is ultimately a little bit more expensive, the cost to do so and then import them into the States actually was almost a wash, maybe had an edge on importing parts from China and then assembling them in the U.S. Which is because of the tariffs that are even on there right now since the last administration, and so it's an interesting thing. I think that that's going to continue to be challenged, and like I said, we're just, at least for us, I can only speak for myself and Jack Mason. We're just trying to be prepared of what's to come, and which is why we layered on this additional supply chain.
Thank you for sharing that context. I want to add some personal thoughts about price increases because I've seen it a lot, and it's made me quite uncomfortable because I don't think that it works as intended. The idea is that you're a small watch brand or a big watch brand, and you're faced with one of two scenarios. A, you have to make more money. B, your costs are going up. And the reality is that the easiest thing you can do, not the wisest thing, but the easiest thing you can do is just increase your prices. And as you said, pass that cost on to the consumer. Oh, this part costs us more to make. Well, we're just going to pass that on to you, even though you're getting the same thing. It just costs us more. The primary problem I have with that, other than the fact that I think the consumer is taking too much of the burden, is that the consumer, in my opinion, is for the most part fundamentally unforgiving. Because in their mind, they're like, wait a minute, your job as a brand is to keep your costs down as much as possible and offer me a good value for my money. Because at the end of the day, this is still essentially a kind of a commodity, even though we don't like to think about it that way. And it really doesn't matter to me if it costs you more. There's competitors that offer me what I want for less. You need to be judged by the cost of the competitor product, not by what it costs you. Because frankly, I don't care if it costs you more for cases. That's none of my business. I'm in the market for a good value. And if you can no longer deliver it to me, so sorry. And so I think that as brands get further separated from this very important, element of consumer psychology, they, as I think you were alluding to, run the risk of fundamentally alienating their consumer, not because they try to, but because the consumer simply isn't forgiving that for the same product it costs you more money, but I no longer want to buy it at that higher price. It was only exciting to me. That design for that price, that's what was exciting for me. Now that you're 30% more, I'm no longer excited. Sorry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something we deal with as brand owners every single day. There are so many options out there. It's almost impossible to have something better, right? And it's a matter of perspective. I've learned to just choose to appreciate the industry as a whole, appreciate the fact that there are that many options out there. I think it's really important. Actually, this is kind of a good segue to something that I've been wanting to talk about, which is okay, you have your objective value in the watch, but what else can you offer the customer in terms of value? And so I think
like a bottle of Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, yes, that may be one way to do it. Yes, that may be
very, very cold Dr. Pepper.
Yes, yeah. But it's something that I discuss with my team internally all the time. It's how do we create more value? And really, ultimately, that comes down to is experience. It's what is that experience that the customer has with that interaction that they have with your brand? Because every single interaction, whether it's in an email, or if you're doing digital marketing, the advertisement, or if you're doing shows and you meet them face to face, all of these little moments are touch points. And so being extremely cognizant of every single touch point and making sure that journey represents your brand to exactly how you want it to be, I think is where you start to separate yourself as a brand, not as a watch, but as a brand. And I think that that's a big focus of ours, is to make sure that we are building value in the brand, so that it's that is sort of the leading reason why a customer buys us over another company that happens to make watches.
Now, this is such a crucial point, but it gets kind of, difficult to figure out the strategy once you really get into it. And, what you're talking about is the separation of commodity and what you're purchasing. In the abstract, not all, but most watches are a commoditized good in the sense that you could theoretically replace it with something else, and there's supply chains. There isn't necessarily like one human being who's an artist, which is doing all this stuff. So in a very real way, most watches are a commodity. With that said, because of the emotions that people are supposed to attach to them, you have to sell it slightly differently. And the reason why someone buys one watch or another is an emotional reason versus a pure commodity reason. Like, that has a 5% better bracelet, but only a 2% more price. Right? Like, that's not exactly what consumers think, at least not directly. So it's, does that design make me happy? Did that brand treat me well? Is there a gift that goes with buying it that I also want? Do I think my friends, coworkers, whoever will respond to this well because they also have association with it? But these are all the non-product factors which brands deeply desire to create because they create the real differences from brand to brand, right? It's harder to create the real differences in the product. What's easier to do is say, brand A makes me feel good. Brand B, I don't have a relationship. So while their stuff looks good, it makes me feel nothing, right?
Right.
But, and this is sort of the funny thing, and just like human personalities, very few people start this by saying, you know what? I want to be popular. What do? It's more like, I like this thing and I want to go all into it, and maybe that will make me popular. But it's sort of that weird catch-22 thing where by the time you know what you want from a marketing perspective, you're already thinking the wrong way because that's not how to develop that kind of quirky, fun personality weirdness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. No, yes, you are right. And I think that when it comes to building this watch, this commodity, look, there are a lot of great people that currently have brands, and the product's getting better and better and better each time. With every new version, it gets better. And there's thousands and thousands of people doing it. And so, for us, it is, look, we're gonna make a good product. That's like it's almost like a given. But the journey doesn't end there. Like we don't want you to come in, buy a watch from us, and it's like, okay, thanks, goodbye, have a nice day. When you buy a watch from us, that journey actually begins with us. So that's like you're you're on a journey with us, and we want to make sure that we're here. It's almost like, hey, we got your back, right? So things like servicing, making sure we check in from time to time to make sure your experience is as expected. Hopefully it exceeds expectations. Making sure that we're then delivering more product that appeals to you, and that kind of thing. And so I think that that's sort of where we're putting more focus on is, again, that sort of experience and brand value.
So you're talking about consumers going on a journey with you, which I think is a great way of looking at how to approach this. But what are some of those steps? You have their contact information. You can message them. You can email them, whatever. You're going to take them on a journey, road trip with Jack Mason. What are the stops along this road trip?
Yeah. So it actually comes down to just the different channels, tools that you have at our disposal. Email is a big thing for us. So when you look, if I were to share our email sort of tree with you, it looks like a very complicated tree. There's this, for any one customer who buys a product from us, they have their own email journey. So if you were to buy our popular Strata Timer GMT, you will get a follow-up email specific to the watch that you bought. Then from there are multiple sort of emails that come at designated times. So 2 weeks from now, we'll ask, once you buy it, we'll ask, hope your experience is going well. We'll then provide, remind that there are instructions. Here's how you can use your watch in case you forgot or whatever, need more assistance. Then it's 3 months down the road, it's like, hey, is everything holding up okay? But it's constantly reminding, hey, we're here at your disposal if you need it. Here's where you can reach us, that kind of thing. And there's also a lot of if and then scenarios. What if they do open the email? They'll get something else. If they don't open the email, they'll receive a different kind of message. And so it's really being cognizant of also not bombarding them with emails in a way that it makes it sound like, hey, we want you to buy another watch from us. It's really not that at all. It's really just making sure, we live in a digital world. So it's making sure that, when you came to our store, you walked into our store, our online store, want to make sure when you leave that it feels like you are catered to. And so, beyond that, especially for those who bought from us multiple times. I'll personally reach out to them sometimes and just check in on them and say, hey, how are things going? And also I'll actually ask for feedback on the product. And I love doing stuff like that because it only makes our product better. Of course, you can just have to learn to filter through certain things, but ultimately it's a benefit, and I have everything to gain from it.
Let's talk about Intersect now, because I think it's a good segue. We're talking about listening to the consumer and the community. Yes, in the digital era, a big part of this is online, but you, Peter, and a couple of other, American, or not always exclusively American, entrepreneurs have created a show called Intersect, which is a series. And like other watch shows, the idea is that a couple of brands share space in a venue, and people come and they can look and buy and get to know you guys and things like that. I guess the first question is, what exactly was the impetus to get something like this started? Was it that we want to have sort of semi-trade organization feel because we're all alone? Did it just sort of make sense economically? Talk about the impetus for not why shows like this are important, but why you are part of the organizers of such a show like Intersect.
A watch industry, sort of watch enthusiast, darling, if you will, brand Notice. When Wes and Colin, the founders of Notice, have become extremely, just really dear friends of mine, even outside of just watch talk in general. We actually, we share a lot of the similar passions and similar questions, and the desire to get better, not only as a brand, but also as a player in the industry. What is it that what can we do to help the industry and help other owners and brands? And so, dating back to a couple of years ago, it was at a wind-up. I believe it was a San Francisco wind-up. We were just talking, and Wes and Colin had actually started the Intersect show sort of on their own, but more on a smaller scale as a way to, engage and connect with their customers. But as we started talking, we actually, in our Dallas location, where the headquarters that we used to be in, at the intersection of Canton and Hall, we had a large space. It was a beautiful space, and perfect for a small show. And so I thought, as we discussed, like, hey, what if we worked together to invite a handful of brands, and see if we can work together to put on a show? After all, we don't necessarily need a third-party organizer to produce a show. We can sort of do that on our own spare time. Of course, it probably won't have all the glitz and glamour, but hey, we'll several brand owners will be in one room, and we'll have the same product that you see in any other show. And so we kind of went around, reached out, and pitched the idea to some of these owners, and that's how it sort of all came together. And I think the main driver behind the Intersect show is that it is truly collaborative. And what I mean by that is we share our own ideas with each other on how we want to run the show. But also, probably the biggest challenge with some of these larger shows is that it is a huge expense just to exhibit at the show. And it's almost counterproductive, especially when you're a smaller brand or a brand even just starting out. You want to get out to as many people as possible. But if there's a huge cost commitment to it, then it's almost, like I said, it's almost counterproductive. And so we wanted to create a platform where that cost barrier wasn't there. And so what we end up doing is in all of our shows, and we just had one just last weekend here in Austin, Texas, we all the brands split the cost. We split the cost on everything: the venue, the sort of, bar that we have. We have VIP hour where we offer coffee. Every single line item is split. And I think that the brands that participate and their willingness to want to help out, even the small things. And I actually, and I'm a guy who loves to pick up on the small details, but we all arrived in the morning to set up the show. That means getting the tables, unfolding and putting the tablecloths on top of the tables. At the end of the show, we broke it all down. And when you see the brands working together to do that, all of a sudden it doesn't feel like a show, and it feels like almost like a small family where we're all just putting something together to help each other out, because ultimately we're cross-pollinating our own audiences, and it just benefits everyone. So that's kind of how Intersect started, and it continues to grow actually at a rapid rate.
Here's a hypothetical question. If retail distribution was generally easier for your brand and others, meaning it was easier to get your watches into stores in various parts of the country where people could go and see them on a regular basis, would that negate the need to do this? Because I think a very easy business explanation is there's people that want your products out there. It's hard to get in front of them. This show is a very effective way of being able to personally deliver your value proposition to potentially interested consumer, where that would be hard or expensive to do. If there were more traditional wholesale retail ways of doing that, again, would that obviate some of the need to do something like this?
I don't think so. I think both can exist. And the main reason is because of course, the beauty of going to Intersect is to get hands-on with the product. But what you can't do at a wholesale account, at a retail store across the country, is you're not going to be able to talk to the brand owner. And that in itself is the kind of value that Intersect offers, or any watch show for that matter, is to be able to talk to the brand owner, talk to or whoever, whatever stakeholders they're representing the brand, and getting a feel for, being able to ask questions directly. Why did you do this? Or what was the inspiration behind this? Or what do you have coming down the pipeline? These basic kind of questions, or anything. And they have all kinds of questions, and you won't be able to do that at a retail store. And so, funny enough, Jack Mason, that's how we started as a business. It was a wholesale business. And the reason why we got out of it was the very fact that we had no connection with our customers. And so, in 2020, when we pivoted to being a direct-to-consumer business, on the books and on the business side of things, that it was great. But what we missed was, or what the opportunity that it provided was, being able to then go to these shows and connect with our customers, directly. And so, to answer your question, I think both can exist, and I think both should exist, to be honest with you. We just haven't, I think it's still a little challenging to figure out, the direct-to-consumer, or blending of the direct-to-consumer and wholesale model.
I mean, everyone's trying to figure that out right now. So, I think this is an evolving conversation, and I think it's personally interesting because those types of things that are typical of these shows are not brand new inherently in the space. Whereas a retailer would invite, a watch owner from time to time, come meet the watchmaker, blah, 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 go to the store with consumers. Like, this is not uncommon, yet because you haven't had the ability as a brand to do that, you basically took the bold step of saying, hey, let's do it ourselves. And I'm a believer in all this. And as part of that, by the time people listen to this episode, they will see that we have a giveaway. Hopefully this episode will go while we have the giveaway, or if it's not over already. But the Intersect show is going to bring out an aBlogtoWatch audience member to, I believe, the Intersect that's going to be happening in Los Angeles, probably during the summer. The aBlogtoWatch team likes to go to these shows when we can. And I think that there's a real sense of community and camaraderie, right? Like, if you want to be part of the watch community and feel that, rather than just sort of the detached feeling and maybe seeing it on the internet, going to one of these shows is quite satisfying, right? Not only do you get to see the watches and meet with the people behind it, which itself is much more rewarding than maybe speaking to a salesperson. But you get to see fellow enthusiasts like you, see how they look at watches, feel in some senses less strange, maybe be reinforced as to how strange you are. I take it for a bit for granted because I've been interacting with the community for a long time now. But for a lot of people, I'm still delighted to see the novelty that comes from being in a room with a bunch of like-minded, watch enthusiasts. And that's a very powerful sensation for a lot of the folks, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And with just the one that we just had last weekend in Austin, Texas, is remarkable how many people actually just traveled all the way over there, staying the weekend, making a weekend out of it just to come, as you said, see their fellow enthusiasts, make new friends, connect with internet friends sometimes. And, I took the time to make sure I connected with a lot of the show goers there, and the kind of unanimous feedback that I received was that they can feel it. They can sense the community aspect of it. They can sense the teamwork, the collaborative aspect of it. And I think that is, it truly is something powerful. And it truly does lift all the brands that are exhibiting at the show.
Now that Intersect has happened a few times, I know that there's still a lot of things to figure out, but what are some of the things that you and the rest of the team know are going to be constants? Like, this works, we want to maintain it, this always needs to be a part of the Intersect show. What are some of the fundamentals that you figured out so far?
The fundamentals are making sure that the show is not only for the customers, but it's also for the brands as well. The brands, making sure so the brands are taken care of as well. So it's not just, hey, here are 4 walls with your table and with your brand on it, have a nice day. It is making sure the experience as a whole is from A to Z is inclusive. So for example, something that we've found to be extremely successful is the day prior, we actually have a planned sort of icebreaker event. So all the brands, we get together and we break bread, so to speak. We sit there, we talk, we connect. And this is even before the show starts. And it gives a chance for brands to connect with other brand owners who you may not have met. And so you already going into the show have this bond so that you're arriving at the show the next day as sort of like a united front. And we felt that was extremely successful. The other thing is what we call our VIP hour. And what that is a ticketed event about an hour and a half prior to the doors opening to the general public. Those who really feel the need to want to spend extra time with their favorite brands, they can come when the show's less crowded and just have more of a one-on-one conversation with their owners and, as well as their other fellow enthusiasts. But what that accomplishes is brand owners as well. Even for myself, I like to have complete conversations with the people that come to the show. When you're at a larger show, more often than not, the conversation doesn't get past answering how much it is, and then what the specs of the watch are. And you can arguably put that on a sheet of paper, and you don't have to talk to the customer at all. But the VIP hour that we have really allows to have that sort of complete conversation and, more importantly, form that personal relationship with them. And so that's been constant. And then, depending on people's travel schedule, the following day, if it allows, we'll then have sort of like more or less closing ceremonies where we get to just kind of hang out and, talk about how the show went, but also not even talk about watches at all. It's, you spend the day talking about watches all day. It's really great to be able to connect with other brand owners and just talk about, your personal life. What else do you like to do outside of the watch world? And I think that's really unique. I think that's really powerful. And when, for a show like Intersect, we're going to continue to build on that and just create more unique experiences for not only the customers, but also for the brand owners.
Thank you for sharing all that. I guess not only do I agree with the fact that there needs to be more of a business to business sort of networking forum, but that's part of what this show is, right? Like Superlative in my mind is sort of recorded in front of not just a consumer audience, but people who have the same business challenges or experiences and things like that, and would like to hear from someone else in their shoes, right? There's someone else out there who has a brand, who's in a Peter Cho style position. They want to hear from you. You want to hear from them, because it's the sharing of these experiences and practices, which is the only way that it gets communicated. And it isn't until you realize, like, wait a minute, that person, that brand has the same issues as me. If we chatted a little bit, maybe we wouldn't feel as alone at the very least, right?
Absolutely.
We only have time for one more question.
Sure.
And I want it to be this. And I like asking different people this question different ways, because it's a complicated thing and I love it. You spend a lot of your time listening to the audience. Not only you're there at Intersect, you're talking to people, you're a data person. The question is this: when you ask consumers what they want, do they actually know what to say to you in terms of things they're willing to spend money on? Meaning, I think it's great to ask consumers what they want, but I wonder if doing what they say actually gets them to buy anything or makes your brand more marketable. Meaning you should always listen to consumers, no doubt, but how valuable is it to take them at face value or to filter or process their responses into something else which allows you to make wiser business decisions? Because my theory is that consumers don't always know themselves quite as well as they think.
Yes, it's an ongoing challenge. Filtering is it's almost a skill that you have to build when taking on feedback from your customers. It certainly is. It takes time. It takes mental capacity to sit there and actually ask questions and try to get constructive criticism back. But something that I often find is that usually the feedback that you get is, especially the ones who are the most vocal, the things that they want are the things that they cannot have. And so you can, by the end of the day, if you were to go and talk to 5 different customers and made changes or whatever you need to do to those 5 different customers, that same customer is going to change their mind the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And so there's a lot of filtering. Yeah, a lot of filtering needs to be done. And ultimately, I think what has helped me is understanding yourself, understanding ourselves. I have spent a lot of time figuring out what the vision for the brand is and making sure that we stay on course for that. Of course, reaching out to our customers and getting feedback is extremely important, because ultimately we want to be a customer-centric brand and appeal to our own audience. And sometimes there are amazing points that are provided to us, and many of which I've actually implemented into the product just because I haven't thought about it myself. So I think as long as you have the self-awareness, the humility to be able to take in some of that feedback, but also filter it to make sure that you're staying on course with the vision that you create for yourself and the brand, I think that's a healthy mix. So yeah, we'll continue to do so and continue to almost work with our own audience to fulfill our ultimate vision.
I love that things always seem to be moving over at the Jack Mason brand. Peter, we're out of time. Please let everyone know where they can learn more about the company and yourself on the internet.
Of course. Yes. Our website is jackmasonbrand.com. We're also very, very active on our social media, which is also Jack Mason Brand. We do have a Facebook group as well that we moderate. It is a private group, but you just need to join, and there's exclusive info and get to talk to me as well. So we're not hard to find.
This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with the co-founder of Jack Mason, Peter Cho. Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you again, Ariel.